Hey everyone, welcome to this webinar today on how Village Roadshow's VoC program drives customer-centric growth. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join us. I am just going to wait one more minute to let those that are join in the webinar, and we'll kick off at 12:05 Australian time. All right, let's get started. So, first of all, let me introduce you all to Rob. Rob is from Village Roadshow and he's responsible for their Voice of the Customer program. But I'm going to let Rob tell you a little bit more about himself. Hi, Rob.
Hey, Ryan. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on. My name's Robert Young. I'm the Commercial Insights Analyst for Village Roadshow Theme Parks. I've been with the organization since 2017 now, so almost 7 years with them. As Ryan mentioned, I manage the Voice of Customer program, everything from customer guest experience, surveys, anything you can imagine, customer guest experience related for Village Roadshow. I'm the guy. I guess for anybody who doesn't know who or what Village Roadshow is, we own and operate theme parks on the Gold Coast, including Movie World, SeaWorld, Wet and Wild, Paradise Country, Australian Outback Spectacular, and Topgolf. So a bit of a portfolio of theme parks, yeah.
Amazing. Thanks, Rob. And for those of you that don't know me, my name's Ryan Stuart. I am the co-founder and CEO of Kapiche, and I am going to guide you on this journey through the ever-changing and evolving landscape of customer experience, voice of customer analytics, and perhaps the most mystifying thing of all, AI. I feel somewhat qualified to do this because I do have close to 20 years of experience in natural language processing and AI and its application in a range of industries, but in particular for the last 5 years in the world of CX and voice of the customer. So join me as we dive into the world of insights, exploring the tools, tactics that are reshaping the way businesses understand their customers. So just a little bit of housekeeping for those that haven't used this webinar platform before. On what is probably the right-hand side, you'll be able to ask questions if you want. And for those questions that we answer via writing into the box, you'll be able to see answers to the question as well. So at any point in this discussion, if you have a question, chuck it in there. We might pick it up during the conversation or we might pick it up at the end. There's also going to be at least one, if not more, polls running during the course of this webinar. So keep an eye on the polls tab. Feel free to cast your vote if you feel like you have something to say. And finally, keep in mind that the way that you vote is anonymous. And then finally, the recording of this webinar is going to be available afterwards. So if you need to go and catch a quick break during, don't fret. You'll be able to access the recording after the fact. Okay. Rob, I know there's been some pretty big changes since you joined Village. Can you talk us through to the lead up and talk us through the lead up to where you're at today? So everything that precedes today.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, I joined in 2017, the theme parks. So when I joined Village Roadshow, it was a pretty transitional period for the theme parks at that point in time. So we had come out of, just prior to 2017, quite an extensive period of heavy discounting, deep discounting on our theme park tickets. It was probably a decade plus of heavy discounting on our ticketing products. You could pretty easily get an annual pass ticket to our theme parks for under $100. So it was all just about driving volume, getting as many people through the gates as we could. So when I joined in 2017, probably about 3 to 6 months before I joined, we had a new CEO in the organization, Clark. And when he came in, he kind of turned everything upside down. We did a pretty extensive review on our ticketing and customer strategy at that point in time. So what we did was we did away with the heavy discounting, the volume-based strategy that we did prior to 2017, and we decided to go with a more of a premium offering, kind of repurpose our brand and purpose it more in the premium product space. So higher ticket prices and less volume, which was intentional. And from a guest experience point of view, having less people come through the gates just means people can do more stuff during their day. They can see more things, do more attractions. So it was all very intentional going with that strategy. As well as changing that ticketing strategy, we realized, we're probably going to need a pretty good customer experience to underpin those ticket prices. And we wanted to lift those over the next few years. So again, we did another review of our customer strategy, and we decided that Net Promoter Score was the appropriate or the best metric for theme parks at the time. We really had nothing prior to 2017 again. So prior to that, we had very little survey feedback. It was very intermittent, ad hoc around the school holiday times, but there wasn't any real process or program in place. So we went with Net Promoter Score, proper voice of customer program, and we were getting daily surveys, 100, 200 plus a day in the really peak period. So it was, again, big change from a customer and ticketing perspective, and a really simple survey at the time, which was intentional just to drive volume. And we wanted to make that really simple, just ask the NPS question, get that open-ended feedback from the customers, and maybe a few other demographic pieces. But again, very intentional, keeping that short just to drive volume and get as much customer data at that point in time. Yeah.
And it sounds like you mentioned you joined 2017. Sounds like that NPS survey got started around about the same time. Have you ever looked back, or do you often look back to where you're performing at now versus where you're performing at today, and take stock of the progress that you've made since those early days?
Yeah, we do. We do take stock. Intermittently, we have done that over the 7 years. We pretty regularly look back at how we've gone over those 7 years, where we started, what kind of goals we set, and where we've progressed. So at the time, we kind of had a very long-term goal or strategy to get the parks at a 50 plus on the NPS scale. So we kind of looked at, a number of years ago, what were the best in market theme parks doing? What were your Disneys and Merlins and all those entertainment precincts doing at the time? A lot of them were getting 60s, 70s plus on Net Promoter Score. So we knew we wanted to, not in the short term, but in the long term, get to 50 plus. So in the short to medium term, we've kind of set a 20 as like our benchmark at the moment, with the goal to get to 50 in the longer term. That's kind of how we've tracked things when we look at it over a long-term time frame. But NPS has still remained our key metric, so we haven't shied away from that in the 7 years we've done it. We've stuck with that for the 7 years, and we could have easily, to begin with, and some of the tougher points in the business, switched it off or maybe shied away from it a little bit, but we haven't done that, which has been fantastic. We've stuck with it for 7 years, and I think we're seeing the benefits from that now. So much so that if you go to our key executive dashboards now, NPS is on that very, very first page that the COO, CEO will open up first thing in the morning. So with our ticketing and attendance and all our key business metrics, NPS is firmly next to those as well. So it's been great that we've stuck with that.
And I just want to put some context to the plus 50, by the way. And it's so difficult with NPS scores because it all really depends on how you collect it. And I've seen some companies who say, oh yeah, NPS score is amazing, it's in the 50s or 60s, when in reality, the number they're reporting isn't a true NPS score. And the actual true NPS score, I can guarantee you, isn't anywhere near 50 or 60. I can guarantee that because one of the most beloved brands in the world, Harley Davidson, has an NPS score of 64. And let me tell you, if you're a Harley Davidson fan, you tend to be on the hardcore scale. So a goal of 50 plus, I think is super lofty. 2 questions for you. Was NPS decided prior to your arrival, or was it implemented prior to your arrival? And then supplementary question to that. It's been close to 7 years now with NPS. How are you feeling about the NPS metric and about the choice that was made back then to use NPS?
Yeah, I guess to answer the first question, when I arrived in 2017, it was already decided that Net Promoter Score was going to be our key customer metric. So I wasn't involved in that process. So when I showed up, NPS was the metric that was decided. That's what we're going to use. That's what's best for the business. We had a survey up and running, like I said, a very short, simple survey. So that was all decided prior to me arriving. But I guess nothing in place to take it to the next level or really drag it out further. In terms of how do I feel about the metric now, that's a good question. I have thought about that, and we have asked that throughout the 7 years I've been there. A lot of articles on NPS and customer metrics. I'm still really comfortable and confident with it, and I think we are as a business as well, for a number of reasons. Obviously, we've used this for 7 years now, so it's going to have a little bit of inherent bias. But for me, we just tend to find that 200-point scale that NPS is on a little bit more actionable. So the plus 100 to the minus 100, you just find in some of the conversations, the score moves. It's a little bit more sensitive when that score moves, from +5 to -2 or from 20 to 15, whatever it is. It just feels like it has a little bit more weight and credibility to it, and you get a little bit more action, as I said. I just feel with maybe like an average metric or like a CSAT, for example, I'm not trying to put anyone down or any metric down more than another, but I just tend to find when we're using those average metrics, it doesn't tend to hold the same weight when we've had some of those discussions. It just, if you're going from like 7.8s to 7.6s, it just doesn't seem like it has the same kind of discussions and action to it when we've had some of those conversations. So that's probably one for me. We really like the open-ended feedback text box that comes with NPS. So getting all that rich data of, people telling you why they're giving the score that they are, we find that's incredibly valuable. Even more so than the Net Promoter Score. So for me, those two things, I think, we're really comfortable with it as a business. We've used it for quite a long time. We know, it works for us. So I think it's still very relevant for us. And I think when we started as well, we were very conscious of, because this was a new metric, it's a totally new change for the business. How can we proactively link this to some of our other metrics in the business, particularly operations? So obviously, as a theme park, operations is a huge piece for us. So being able to correlate Net Promoter Score to the throughputs on the day, the ridership, how many people are going through each of the attractions, what's open, what's closed. Having that correlation just helped us to help the business get a better understanding of Net Promoter Score and just understand the root causes of some of those movements a bit better. So for us, doing that as well as, the NPS was fantastic to begin with. I think back to some of the early examples that we had, because obviously there was a lot of, questions on how does this work and is it relevant when we first begun the Net Promoter Score program. To try and get that buy-in early on, some of those correlations were very important. So I think back to, capacity was a very key thing for us as a theme park. Like, how many people can we let into the park during a day, and particularly night events? We didn't have any data before, so we didn't really know for sure how many people could we put through a Halloween event or a Christmas event. And we could pretty clearly see in some of the work that we did that, you go over a certain amount, that the Net Promoter Score, the guest experience would drop pretty significantly. And if we kept it under some of those capacity levels, well, then we had the kind of optimum or optimal Net Promoter Score outcome. So for us, that was really key early on, to try and get buy-in and just prove that the metric is valuable then, and it still is today.
Yeah, awesome. I want to dive in a little bit more into the nuts and bolts of how the VoC program runs. You don't have a CX team at Village, right? Which can be hard to drive action with frontline teams. You don't have that person in the ear of the frontline teams constantly pushing those action items forwards and bringing it to the front of their mind. Can you talk to me about how incorporating other sources of feedback has made it easier to drive action, or you believe will make it easier to drive action?
Yeah, for sure. Good question. we don't have a CX per team per se. The Insights and Analytics team, which is where I said, I guess we are the de facto or proxy CX team. So we're there to drive analysis and reviews and change and help the business and the various departments. So I guess we perform that as a proxy. For us, in order to help drive some of that change in action, since we started in 2017, we've made a few changes and we've expanded the program a little bit by incorporating other pieces of feedback. So big things for us is looking at external review platforms like Google and TripAdvisor, us or having someone look at that and responding to those. Is there anything in there we're not capturing? Is there anything in that we're not capturing in our internal feedback? We have internal feedback inboxes for staff, so we're encouraging staff to send through suggestions that they're seeing on the front lines, because they're the ones on the front lines that will see things even before us. So can they send us feedback that potentially we're not seeing in some of the customer feedback? The other thing which has been we're kind of working through at the moment with you guys with Kapiche is looking at our contact center data, so our email transcripts and what are guests asking us, what questions are they asking us before they even get to the park, just to try and be a little bit more proactive around some of that, some of those insights, as opposed to being reactive that we may have done in the past. So just incorporating those other pieces has helped drive change, whether that's be from the frontline staff, from the contact center sharing insights, from operations, getting it from staff or whoever it is. Incorporating those other pieces to then have other departments drive voice of customer has been key.
It's also fascinating to think about things like the support center. Who owns the customer experience of the support center and who's responsible for measuring that customer experience? Because what you often find in the support center is that the people that manage the support center are much more concerned with operational metrics for good reasons. But that's a whole nother topic. Let me talk to you about kind of meeting the team where they are. Interesting setup with the theme parks, the number of theme parks that you've got, and then the teams that are in those theme parks. Probably very different to what a standard business structure looks like, in that you've got a whole bunch of operational people that are running those theme parks. And I would imagine that the kind of how you deliver those insights to them really makes a big difference to whether they get acted upon or taken seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a bit of a unique business in the fact that we are spread across a number of properties, and not only that, some of the key people in the business, they're not at their desk, right? They're on the front lines. They're in a F&B outlet. They're at an attraction. So it is sometimes a bit of a challenge. We have been conscious of it. That's been something we've been conscious of since the beginning, in trying to get some of these insights to the business as early as possible. So we know that having the dashboard set up that we do for guest experience is great, but it doesn't always. You're not going to have the staff go to them inherently every day. Like I said, they're on the front lines. They got a lot of work to do themselves. So for us, a big piece for us was getting the email digest activated. So with the help of Kapiche, being able to send those insights to the business, to their email inboxes on a monthly basis, giving them the insights, straight or directly to them without them having to, log into a dashboard or without having to be at their computer necessarily. So that's been really great for us, disseminating some of that information. We've probably had that in place for maybe just under 12 months now. So it's still fairly new, but we are seeing it is helping to drive a little bit of action a little bit sooner, which is great. I think just a few months ago, we had the GM of SeaWorld asking us some of the questions about, why some of his scores were down in particular areas at SeaWorld. It was great to see, people actually asking questions without us having to go to them, which was fantastic. And then, them asking, why is this down? What can you see in the data, or where can we get it? And we were able to provide them, that same day, we can see some opportunities to improve some of the upkeep or cleanliness in certain areas of the park. So we're able to send those out and within the same day actually action that, which we couldn't necessarily do 5, 6, 7 years ago when we started the program, and it's something we've been conscious of trying to do for some time now. So it's great we're at that point.
Yeah, that's a really awesome example. But the nature of this role, as I'm sure you know, having been in it now for the better part of 5 years, it's never one and done. An example like you just gave, it helps build that short-term credibility and almost kind of spark a light in your peers of, oh, this capability is available to me and this team can deliver this. How do you maintain that kind of increase in credibility and internal reputation long-term rather than just in the short term?
Yeah, for me, there's probably a couple of things. So I think I just touched on it a little bit earlier, but having multiple areas and multiple departments and people championing the voice of customer. So there's obviously myself, the team, going at it from a manager perspective. Clive in the ears of the executive. So he's the head of commercial insights. So him in the ears of the executives and the executive team, the call center team, they're on the phones and providing feedback from what they're seeing, the frontline staff, through internal staff feedback. So having all those different areas, all those different departments voicing, I guess, essentially voicing the customer. So coming at it from different angles just adds to the credibility. And if you're seeing those insights and the same things come up every day, it just adds to that buy-in. Again, I mentioned it before, very early on for us was, correlating NPS to some of those operational metrics. So capacity, what kind of capacities can we do? Oh, we can very clearly see, we don't want more than 6,000 people here. Okay, so let's not do that in the future. We can see if we break that experience. Another key thing for us was just after COVID, we probably about 12 months after COVID, we introduced a new event at Movie World. So at that point in time, it was just after COVID, so we had a lot of challenges in getting rides up and attractions and having things on all the time, and that was a pretty key challenging period for us. That 6, 12, 18 months after COVID. So we introduced a new event to try and improve the guest experience, particularly around holiday periods. So we introduced this Hooray for Hollywood event, which was fantastic for the couple of weeks that we had it. But then we were kind of like, we had the school holiday period actually being a little bit longer because some of the interstate holidays and the local holidays were split at that particular point in time. So we're like, do we extend this event a little bit longer to provide a better guest experience? And there was questions on the validity of that, and is it actually providing a better experience? And we could see, with the help of Kapiche and the sentiments that guests were actually finding benefit in some of the upweighted entertainment and some of the things that we were doing in the park over that particular period in time. So that next day we were like, yeah, let's extend this for another week, and we did that, and we saw an uplift in the scores in that period of time, which was great to see. So just having all these little wins and all those little things happen early on just added to the credibility, and just doing those things over time. And as long as you have the data to prove it, that's always been key for us, and being able to show that that these things work. It's not just what we think of. It's not how we feel on the day. It's actually proven by data. Yeah.
I would hazard a guess that over the last 2 years, perhaps even further back than that, maybe perhaps even since COVID times, budgets have been very tight in hospitality sectors and entertainment sectors, perhaps getting even tighter as time moves forward. This likely puts even more scrutiny on investment decisions for guest experiences. So initiatives that you're undertaking in order to improve or de-risk making those decisions of investing in guest experience improvements. How have you gone about trying to de-risk those decisions as much as possible for the organization?
Yeah, I'll probably repeating myself a little bit, but I think the work that we did really early on in the program, in bringing in all those operational and secondary metrics, having those other data sources like Google Reviews, TripAdvisor, contact center data, all that work that we're doing and bringing in other pieces of feedback, other metrics within the business, and correlating them to NPS, it just adds weight and proves that it actually works. So then when we get questions on, what do we spend money on? What do we do as a next attraction? What do we do, an F&B or whatever it is, we're able to have the knowledge that, okay, we've done all this work here, then we can apply it to whatever this particular project or program is. So for us, all that early work we did was fantastic to get us to where we are today. And we can see over time, some of those investments that we have brought in guest experience, things that we brought in have actually worked. So one of the early things for us, one of the challenges we have as a theme park is obviously shade and cooling and the hot summers, and particularly around the school holiday periods. That was one of the things we identified early on that we wanted to, okay, let's actually try and spend a bit of money and fix in the program. So we did that. We took a bit of a risk. Okay, let's make some improvements in that space, and let's identify areas that in particular parks where we need to spend a bit of money on shade and cooling and try and improve that experience. And we did that, and we saw fantastic results after the holiday period. We could pretty clearly see that the sentiment around those areas improved greatly. So having those little wins, I think, just again added to the buy-in, added to the credibility, and just showed that some of the work that we had been doing was making an impact. So we went from those little key wins to now we're getting questions on new attractions and new precincts. So I don't know if anyone's familiar, but we've got a major precinct opening at Movie World at the end of the year, multi-million-dollar attraction on Wizard of Oz. So we're getting questions on what do we do in that space, and that's a big investment. What do we need to put in? What kind of attraction is it? So for us, there were key things that we identified that we want this to be a family attraction, and we wanted to go really hard on the theming. Those were the two things that we were seeing in the customer data and the feedback that we needed to tackle. And being able to get that over the line was because of all the work that we did in the 7 years prior. So it was fantastic. We got to that point that we did.
One of the reasons why I was super excited for this webinar in particular, Rob, is that you've got lived experience for the past 7 years delivering insights into a VoC program, pre-technology, post-technology. You come with a wealth of experience, having actually done the job. So I reckon this is probably the most important question of the webinar. Please run us through the lessons that you've learned in the last 7 years, and what do you think the future holds for your program?
So the first thing that comes to mind for me in terms of what have we learned, or what have I learned, or what do I do differently? We were very focused on the score to begin with. So naturally, we didn't have a program. We didn't have, as I said, really survey data to begin with. We were very focused on what's the score? Is it up? Is it down? Oh, it's 10 this week. Oh, now it's 9. Oh. So we were very focused on that score to begin with. Where I think we tried to shy away a little bit from that. Not totally, obviously, it's still very important, but we wanted to focus more on what are the guests actually saying, and maybe we could have focused on that a little bit more to begin with. There was obviously that very exploratory phase to begin with, which is why we went down the road that we did. But I think if you just focus on what is the guest saying, the score kind of takes care for itself, right? Like, it is what it is. It's just a part of what the guests are saying, and what are you improving in that space. So for me, that was one of the first things that I kind of think on. I guess probably closely linked to that actually is us being very reactive to begin with, as opposed to proactive. So I kind of touched on it with why we're looking at contact center data and frontline staff feedback and all that kind of stuff. Is we're trying to get to the point where we're proactive rather than, as I said, reactive. So a lot of the stuff early on is, oh, this is what's went wrong. Okay, let's fix it. Oh, this didn't work. Okay, let's not do that. Rather than not get to that stage to begin with, actually go, oh, we're seeing, customers ask these questions early on. Okay, maybe we can not get to that point of having to fix things after they're broken. So for me, they're probably the two things kind of come to mind in terms of what have I learned, particularly very early on. In terms of where we're going, that's a good question. We're discussing that, almost on a daily, if not weekly basis in the business. Obviously, at the moment, we're going through a phase of ingesting contact center data into Kapiche, so we're looking at some of those other data sources. So that's something in the short-term future. There are other things that I've seen out there which have been pretty interesting to read on, which we've only just started to look at. So things like earned growth is a really interesting metric, which is quite new in the net promoter space, which looks really interesting in terms of, how many customers have you earned versus how many customers have you purchased. I think that's a really interesting concept, and that would be a fantastic metric to get up and running. Actually doing that is a little bit different, but that kind of whole linking it to financial metrics is probably something that we are very cognizant of doing, and probably something we'll look at in the medium to long-term future. So that's something which comes to mind.
Yeah, exploring the economic model behind NPS and getting it out of the theoretical of what other people have seen and being able to ground it in something that's actually real for your organization. A very powerful initiative. Unfortunately, difficult to implement, and you're beholden somewhat to the data you've got, and whether you are able to implement it. But yeah, it'd be really cool if you can. Okay, that was awesome. Thanks, Rob. We are going to open up the floor now for Q&A. There's been a couple of questions, so I'm going to ask them now while we wait for any other questions to come in. One really, I guess you call it a hot button topic right now in this world is, are surveys dying? And I think what's driven that topic is the decline of response rates over the years to surveys for a multitude of reasons. So I've got a few points to the question that I want to ask you. Number one, if you're willing and if you are allowed, could you share with us what your average survey response rate looks like? Number two, how has your survey evolved over the 7 years in terms of its structure? And number three, if there has been structural changes to that survey, what impact have you seen on the response rates?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's probably very timely because we have seen the same thing. We've seen response rates declining. That's a fact. We've made changes. We've made changes over time which have affected that. So initially, we collect surveys in Park and via email. Because of COVID, we shut down our in-park collection, and we're trying to get that up and running again today. But we have seen response rates declining. So for us, I don't think that the survey is necessarily dead, but some of the things that I was talking about in terms of getting frontline staff feedback and getting contact center feedback and getting all of that information is to try and help with the declining survey data. That's one of the pieces, as well as having more rich information and being a little bit more proactive, as I said. So that's one of the things that we're doing, and we've made a change in doing, in trying to combat that. So that's absolutely something that we're seeing, and we're trying to improve upon. So in terms of response rates, we are around the 5% mark. So I would say it's okay, not great. Could definitely be better. I'd like it to be a bit better, but we'll have to make some changes in order to improve upon that. I think customers just don't have the time or aren't willing to spend as much time as they used to be. So that's why we're looking at other sources and other methods to try and combat that.
And next question for you: thinking about recent innovations in the AI space, ChatGPTs of the world and related products to ChatGPT. Any impact on your way of working, or any potential perceptions that you can share of that new wave of AI technology?
Yeah, as a business, we're probably in the very, very early infant stages of looking at AI. It's something we've been mindful to be careful of for the obvious reasons, all the stuff you see out there of it, potentially being biased, and it still has a lot of work in that space to do. So we haven't gone down AI too much at the moment, down the road of AI too much at the moment. It's something which we're just having early conversations on, and look, it'll at some point be implemented in the business. Maybe not necessarily as a first point for customer, maybe in other areas, but it's something we're in the very early stages of. So I probably can't share too much, unfortunately. Sorry. It's
it's difficult to it's difficult to imagine how it would be implemented particularly well in the kind of VoC and insight space, because as you say, there's biases, but there's also that worry of hallucinations, and it's just telling you an outcome or a conclusion that isn't supported by the data, and it's hard for you to validate whether it is or isn't supported without you just doing the analysis by yourself. And if you were to take that insight to a senior stakeholder and therefore get a business decision made off the back of it, and it transpired that, in fact, that insight was hallucinated or fabricated, that would be a very bad outcome for everyone involved.
Yep. Agreed.
And great question. Third question, somewhat related to a topic that we spoke on in a different webinar. Do you incentivize survey participation? And if so, how?
Good question. We do not. And it's something which was, as part of the initial review that I kind of touched on at the beginning of the webinar, that was one of the things we were very cognizant of not doing. We haven't incentivized it, and we haven't incentivized it in terms of giving incentives to the customer, and we haven't really incentivized it internally in terms of remunerations and things like that. Maybe there are some loose ones that I'm not aware of, but for the most part, we haven't really incentivized it as far as I'm aware. And both of those things have been consciously done.
Interesting. And I really should have probably asked that incentivization question when I asked your survey response rate, because 5% with incentivization probably isn't that good, but 5% without incentivization is, as you said, not too bad.
Yep.
All right. I think that's it for questions. Rob, I want to thank you so very much for taking the time to share your experiences with us. It's, as I said, one of the reasons I was really excited about this webinar is because we've got someone in yourself that has lived experience implementing NPS, implementing a VoC and Insights program. And I think it's great for our community when we can learn directly from those experiences and take some of those learnings back to our everyday life. So thank you.
No, anytime. Thank you for having me.
I said goodbye too early. Stephen Hill on the buzzer with a question. Let me read it. So the question is, Rob, keen to understand whether you observe any differences between, in-person versus online response. Have you got in-person back up and running, or are they not back up and running post-COVID?
No, we haven't got them back up running post-COVID, but to answer your question, yes, absolutely. When we had them running prior to COVID, there was absolutely a significant difference between in-person and online. We were seeing online scores probably 10, 15 points below in person. So the in-person scores were much, much higher. And we had a lot of conversations like, why is that? Because it was something which, we asked a lot of questions, and then we switched off the in-person piece. So then our scores all dropped as well. So it was something which we've spoken about at length as to why that is. And we've got many theories, but yeah, absolutely. We have seen that. Yep.
Interesting. Yeah. What's your theories on that, Rob?
In terms of theory, I don't know if it's this whole, you do stuff online and you get that whole, for lack of a better word, keyboard warrior thing. So you do the piece online, you're just going to give a little bit more raw feedback. You're just going to tell them what you think. You've had some time to think about it. You're going to get the survey a day, a week later, whatever it is. You've had time to think about it. You've looked up stuff online. You've gone, oh, actually, wait, I agree with this more. And maybe that wasn't as good. My memory doesn't remember that as well. Whereas in person, you've got the staff member there. So you're maybe a little bit more conscious of, I don't want to be, too harsh with them, or oh, I'm just exiting the park. I've had a really good day. I just did an attraction. I just did a roller coaster. I'm feeling really good, really good. You just have those, endorphins running. So maybe you're just more likely to give a better score there. They're kind of some of the working theories we've got at the moment, but absolutely keen to hear if there's any other points.
Which number, the in-person or the online, which NPS score do you think is more pure if you had to pick one?
The analytical person in me would say you need to do both because that's truly unbiased. If you're asking me to pick one, I would probably say the online piece. It's a good question. It's interesting. Yeah, if I had to pick one, I would probably say the online, just because it's, as I said, it's a little bit more, maybe more thought out. You don't have those emotions running of just coming off rides and in park, and you maybe have the staff member try and interpret the questions for you or whatever it is. So I think maybe that's maybe a little bit more unbiased, but you kind of need a blend of everything, right?
Yeah, I would theoretically, I would say if that online survey were to arrive a day or two after the experience, that the responses you're going to get, not necessarily from the score, but from the open-ended question, are going to reflect much more what are the aspects of the experience that truly matter. Because if you think of having an experience that you had 2 days ago and trying to reflect it, you're only going to retain the bits that are actually important to you. And to your point on endorphins and roller coasters, you're not going to be influenced by something that happened 10 seconds ago. So if you had to pick one, I agree with you. I'd probably go with online, but yeah, I agree that having both would be the best of both worlds. Yeah, I'll be in the realm of earned growth. Have you considered trying to go to a middle ground and measure like repeat visits or net revenue retention?
Yes, we have. Because I think you touched on it earlier, it's very hard to measure, which is kind of one of the roadblocks we're coming with now. So we look at things like pass renewals, how often a customer's coming back, and correlating that to NPS. So that's kind of the road we've gone down. So, we can see if that experience drops, that the length of time that a customer comes back to the park increases. If that score improves, as a whole, that length of time shortens. So we can see very loosely, some of these trends and correlations, to kind of get us to a middle ground. With net revenue retention, again, it's hard because we don't always capture we don't capture all the data for every single ticket type. So on an annual pass, we capture a bunch of different demographic and responses, but on a single day ticket, we might not capture all of that. So we just don't capture the same data for everything. So we're just cognizant of working through that. But we do have some kind of loose middle ground pieces at the moment that we're working on.
Yeah, obviously, as we all know, correlation doesn't equal causation. But in that work that you have done, you've seen statistically significant correlations to those likelihood to renew pass or amount of time between visits.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Yeah, interesting. Guess the system works, allegedly. All right. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you again. Appreciate it.